Hello. We've had some really good speeches so far, so some good presentations. Really exciting ones around productivity, communication. I thought, what could I offer that's exciting? I thought, well, payroll. so I'm here. I'm Sean Hodges. I'm engineering lead at Transferwise. I work in the business team. And what we do is effectively we help businesses to send money internationally. Transferwise itself, hands up anybody who's used Transferwise before. Oh, awesome, we've got a fair few people. I don't need to say what Transferwise does then, but for those of you who haven't heard before, Transferwise, the way it works is it handles it does international money transfers, but it does it in such a way that we can do very low cost, very easy and very fast transfers. And the way we do it is we send the money from into a domestic bank account within the country that you're in, and then at the other side, we make an instruction to pay the money out to your recipient. And that's basically how it works. We've got about 3 million customers at this stage, and that's still growing. And we have about 2 billion, they're sending about 2 billion pounds sterling through our system every month, which is pretty incredible. And what we find is that we've actually worked out that that's about 2 million pounds worth of savings that are being made overall each month as well. So the teams I work with, we're very distributed. So we have offices around the world. We've got America, UK, Estonia, Singapore is in there, Australia. And so we're quite attuned to some of the challenges that many remote working companies have as well. But one of the things, so what I wanted to do was to just sort of explain where we were coming from, because for those people who have local bank accounts, that operate locally and don't have remote workers, they actually find that their bank accounts actually work really well. They can send money very cheaply, very fast. It can often be almost instant because they have some faster payment style system in place. But the problem is, for remote working companies, they actually have some issues. So when you need to send money to employees overseas, the banks often actually charge a fee for the process, and you might not know it because the fee is often hidden within the exchange rate. So what you find is that you're actually paying a lot more than you should do, but you're not aware of it. The other issue that happens is that the speed of the transfer is a lot slower, very often a lot slower. It can take several days for the money to get to its destination. And the other thing is you also have to deal with the exchange rate itself. So when the employee, you intend to send the wages to the employee so they can pay their mortgage, and what they actually receive isn't what you actually agreed, because you have the exchange rate has fluctuated and you haven't taken that into account, or you haven't been able to. So at Transferwise, we have some features that we've been working on to sort of try and tackle some of these issues. One of the main things I mentioned already is that we focus on trying to make our payments as fast as possible, but at the same time, we try to keep the balance of trying to keep the costs low. In fact, every time we manage to make any kind of savings on our on any of the currency routes that we support, we immediately pass that to the customer. So we're constantly trying to drive down our fees. I think just last week we actually announced that we'd reduced a whole bunch of fees down to from 0.5% to 0.3%. Some stuff on the Twitter account if you're interested. And we also were aware that there was, whilst we can make the payments as fast as possible, it's not always possible for every single type of route or payment type. So what we're able to do is we have a tracking system that we use called our delivery estimator that actually measures the speed of these transfers, and we use that to then give back to the customer how long it actually will take, or it should take, for their payment to actually make its way to the destination. We also have a feature that's called pay to email, and what we use that for is when there's people overseas who want to receive money, who wants to be paid money, they're able to actually just give their name, email address, a fair bit of information to the company, and the company can then use our system with that email address, and they will receive an email from us, and they can basically use our system securely to just submit their bank details and receive the money themselves. And that's really useful because it means that you don't have to negotiate that process of like sending all your money ahead of time. And a lot of people might have that already, but for those who don't have it, this is quite a convenient feature. Another one we have is fixed target payments. It's a thing we call for a feature that we have that allows you to set a guaranteed rate for the money that's being sent. So I mentioned earlier about the fact that the exchange rate can fluctuate, and that can cause issues with making sure that the recipient actually gets the amount of money, the employee gets the money. This is a feature that really comes in useful for that, because it means that we can, at the point of payment, we can guarantee a rate, and when you send the money, the employee will actually receive the wages that you'd originally anticipated. But of course, many companies, they don't just want to pay one employee. You're going to, as you grow, you want to pay more and more workers, and you're going to need a solution that scales. So we have a feature that we call batch payments, and this is what we use for that sort of solution. So it's a very simple system that allows people to set up all of their payments, pay for them all in one go, and send them out, and they can do that month by month, much more quickly than doing each individual transfer. And this works multi-currency as well, and it also supports some of the other features I just mentioned. So you can use pay with email with batch payments. You can use fixed target with batch payments. The way it works is pretty simple. So you can download a spreadsheet from our site, fill it in with Excel. Some people might be familiar with this sort of format. When you filled in all the payment details, you then just upload when you're ready to pay, and for our website, and you can pay using your bank account, or you can use our Borderless feature, which I'll come back to in a minute. Once you've uploaded and paid, we then have a tracking system, so you can track how your payment's getting on and when it's completed. I wanted to touch a bit on the people who are actually being paid, because that's important too. If you're employing people remotely, they need to be able to receive money. And if they've moved abroad recently, or if they've traveled quite a lot, then they can have trouble actually opening up a bank account, actually having this ability to actually receive the money for the employer. And we realized this quite early on in the process. But we found that we needed a new kind of feature for this. So we invented the Borderless Account for ourselves. And what this allows you to do is the employee can actually open one of these, and they can use it to receive money from the employers. And actually, the way it works is it allows them, it uses all the same processes that we use for our standard transfers, but the user effectively has an account that they can receive the money in, and they can transfer it between currencies at their leisure, and then they can spend on it. We also, back in April, we released our debit card. This makes it much easier. It completes the whole cycle. So a recipient can actually, an employee can actually receive the debit card. They can use Borderless to receive the money from, say, batch payments. And they can then use that debit card anywhere. I think we have local bank account details that we support in 4 different currencies, and then there's, I think, another 36 currencies that you can hold money in. We also, much more recently, we've started looking at releasing the business debit card, so that's something that's coming fairly soon, and that will allow employers as well to be able to use the card for their borderless accounts. So I wanted to talk a bit about some of the remote working companies that we work with, but I thought a good story to start with would be actually how we came about. Some of you may have heard the story already, but for those of you who haven't, this is Tarvit and Christo. They were both, so effectively they both had a problem. Tarvit was based in London, but he was receiving euros and he needed sterling. Christo, on the other hand, he was receiving sterling, but he needed to pay his mortgage in Estonia in euros. So they worked out an arrangement between each other that they could just exchange, they could just work out the mid-market rate for the exchange rate and effectively negotiate between themselves that they'll pay into each other's accounts. And they realized that this is something that a lot of other people can actually use. They thought millions of people will be able to make use of this. So they thought, we're going to need to do something a bit more than a spreadsheet. So they started to build Transferwise. So Hotjar, one of the remote working companies that are a customer of ours, and they're completely remote working. They work on analytics and optimization tools for websites. And their CEO David, he had an idea that he wanted to create a lifestyle for people who worked for him, who including himself, so that they would be able to work wherever they wanted, and they wouldn't have all the hassle of having to work in an office. But they hit a few problems straight away. There were operational things that they had to deal with, but one of the major ones that they had was that they had to actually pay these employees that they were hiring, and they started doing this using their bank, and then they actually got blocked by their bank in Malta because they were sending all this money to different countries, and it looked very different to their normal operation. So they hit this problem. They also found that even before that, they were having trouble with actually negotiating all of this, and they had somebody working in finance who was spending an entire day just trying to get all this money sent to the appropriate people for payroll. So they actually started using our batch payment system, and they said they've saved thousands of euros just using Transferwise, just using the batch payment system for all of this, and they've actually saved nearly an entire day for this person in finance. I wanted to just touch a bit on the touch points we have for moving money through our platform. So effectively, I mentioned how Hotjar had trouble with their bank account in Malta, and we obviously have to try to manage that within our own system. We have a lot of automated processes that we have to put in place. So of course we have the onboarding, the actual getting people signed up and verified on our system. So that's an important starting point. And then we have the website. We also have an API on our mobile app, and that allows people to make the payments, also request the transfers. We have to validate that the transfer can actually be made. So we try to do that up front to make sure that it's actually feasible. We then go through a linking process. So this is where your payment will come into our bank. Your bank account will pay into our domestic bank account, or you might choose to use Borderless instead. And we make a link between that and the instruction. We then have to deal with anti-money laundering, the fraud and sanction side of things. So we have systems in place that we have quite advanced fraud and AML system that we've built ourselves that handles a lot of that. We also have people who specialize on that as well. So the automation is always being checked by people as well. Then we have to go through the conversion process, and this is where we use our peer-to-peer process of paying money in to one account and then paying out the other. Now, of course, sometimes money will flow in one direction, but it might not flow the other way so quickly. So for those times when we have an imbalance, we have liquidity operations that allow us to keep balances in check between different accounts. And then finally, we do the payout routing, and all of this is handled has our customer support system. Our customer support people handling all the questions that come in. We have a dedicated customer support. We also have different channels that people can use for all of that, which is pretty important. As it's one of the big things that people say about us is that we have very quick response for customer support. Paylink is another customer that I thought I'd mention. So Paylink is a Dutch startup. They're basically an online auctioning platform, but they have a bit of a twist. So effectively what they do is they allow bidders to do sealed bids, and they use it to measure the market demand for products, and then they feed that back to the people who are selling these products. Paylink had their troubles were really about price. They were using their bank to begin with, and they found it was really expensive. They've got remote workers in Switzerland, Morocco, the UK, and they were finding it very difficult to pay them in an affordable way. And so they then looked to other providers, and they considered using PayPal, but then they found that wasn't ideal either. They were still paying this huge markup on the fees, on the exchange rate in order to actually pay their employees. And I can give a little example of this one. I'll just touch on it. So this is actually a bit of market research that consumer what's it called now? Consumer Insights. Don't quote me on that. Actually put together. We have this on our site as well, so you can check it out for yourself. Effectively, what it is we compared two different types of payments. So with PayPal, we looked at in both cases of Transferwise and PayPal, we compared the markup price on the exchange rate versus the upfront fee. Now, of course, PayPal, in this case, I believe this wasn't a business account that was used. If it's a business account, then you have your monthly fee that you pay. But this had no upfront sender fee, but we had a £7.77 fee for Transferwise. But then on the exchange rate, you can see that PayPal were charging effectively £82.49, but you couldn't see that. With us, we didn't have any markup on the exchange rate. So you can see that the difference is quite vast between them. The total cost was actually much higher for PayPal than it was for Transferwise. Now these figures, obviously, they scale up. So you're paying lots of employees this sort of sums, then you're paying a lot of money. So I wanted to summarize by just touching on what we see as the future when it comes to paying remote workers. We have at Transferwise some product pillars that we use as part of our overreaching mission. And I thought that this adapted quite well over to remote working and the sort of challenges, or sort of things that are important to that. So one of them is actually price. So I mentioned before about these when you're looking at different providers, it's not always easy to look at them and work out exactly how much you're going to pay. Quite often because the fee is actually hidden in the exchange rate. So you need to kind of consider that and see just how expensive is it going to be when I start scaling up and start sending all this money. Convenience. You need to make sure that when you're sending money, that it's not going to take someone days and days to send all this money. It's going to be very costly to do that. So you need to process this straightforward and simple, something like batch payments that will allow you to do it in a very optimal way. Trust. So trust could be seen as the trust between the employer and the employee, for example. So for somebody who's taking on a job, they want to make sure that they're definitely going to get paid by their employer. They may never have met that employer, so there's that element of trust that needs to be overcome. Having some sort of platform that allows that kind of commitment side of it, making sure that people, a recognized brand, gives them that level of trust that compared to, say, if you say, I'm just going to send straight to your bank account. Coverage. So when you're hiring people, you don't really want to be bound to who you which countries you can send money to. You want to be able to hire talent anywhere in the world, wherever you find it. And of course, that comes with its challenges when it comes to coverage, because you're always going to have limits on what the routes are. I mean, at Transferwise, we have, I think, 750 different routes. That's not every single route. So you have to consider that there is always going to be limitations there, but look at the providers and see which are offering the appropriate sort of coverage for what I need to do. And finally, speed. So speed is, I mean, when we talk about speed at Transferwise, we talk about the speed of a transfer. How fast is it going to take for the money to actually go across? I think in this case, it'd be better to look at speed as being a commitment that the money is actually going to be received to the employer efficiently, on time and without fail, so that they can then pay their mortgages or buy old video games, whatever it is that they want to use their money for. So I think at Transferwise, we're a very distributed company. We have autonomous, our teams all work autonomously across all the different offices that we have. We work very closely with our customers, and we're really proud of the fact that we talk a lot with our customers. We try to find out exactly what they need. And I think we are very attuned to what a lot of remote working companies need to do. We find that we have to move very fast. We have to be able to hire talent wherever we can. We have the advantage that we also need to have offices in various different countries, so we're able to kind of do that quite easily for ourselves. But I think the key thing here is just when you're looking at different providers, just have a look at these sort of considerations and just make sure that your solution scales. Thank you.